Jamell Demons, known professionally as YNW Melly, is at the center of one of Florida's most watched criminal prosecutions, not because the internet won't stop talking, but because the courtroom still hasn't finished talking. State of Florida vs. Jamell Demons is an ongoing case in Broward County's 17th Judicial Circuit, where Demons has been charged with 2 counts of first-degree premeditated murder in connection with the October 2018 deaths of Anthony DeAndre Williams, YNW Sakchaser, and Christopher Jermaine Thomas Jr., YNW Juvy. If convicted, he faces the highest stakes available in Florida criminal court: life in prison without parole or a possible death sentence, depending on how the death penalty posture is applied and litigated at the time of any final conviction. Here's why this case matters for bars and receipts. People argue the story like it already ended. It didn't. A jury has not returned a final verdict. There has been no acquittal. There has been no conviction. What exists is a charge, a trial, a mistrial, and a long stretch of pretrial litigation that has kept Demons in custody for years while the court fights over what evidence a new jury will be allowed to see. This is a case where the receipts are not just what happened in 2018. They're what happened in 2019, 2023, and every delay since. The core allegation begins in October 2018. According to law enforcement accounts described in public reporting, Williams and Thomas were shot and later arrived at a hospital with multiple gunshot wounds in the early morning hours. Prosecutors have argued the scene was staged, alleging the victims were shot inside a vehicle and that later actions were taken to make the event appear consistent with a drive-by shooting. The defense has consistently challenged the state's narrative, arguing the evidence does not remove reasonable doubt. That's the legal conflict in plain terms. The state says the evidence points inward, inside the car, while the defense challenges the certainty of that conclusion and the steps investigators took to get there. On February 13, 2019, following a grand jury indictment, Demons and Cortland Henry, known as YNW Bortland, were arrested and charged with the premeditated first-degree murders of Williams and Thomas. Demons entered a not guilty plea. From the beginning, prosecutors treated this as a death-eligible prosecution. That decision shapes everything that follows: the pace, the litigation intensity, the evidence battles, and the stakes of every court ruling. When the case finally reached a jury, it did not resolve the way the public expected. Jury selection began in spring 2023, and the trial started on June 12, 2023. The state sought the death penalty. In opening statements, prosecutors laid out their theory. Demons and Henry murdered their 2 friends and attempted to disguise the deaths as a drive-by shooting. Prosecutors also referenced alleged communications they argued were incriminating, including a message they interpreted as an admission. The defense answered with a strategy you see in contested homicide cases: attack the foundation. Defense counsel argued there was no clear motive presented and that the state's case was filled with gaps that created reasonable doubt. In other words, the defense position was not trust us, it was prove it, and prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. As the trial unfolded, the prosecution relied on categories of evidence that have appeared repeatedly in public reporting: forensic reconstruction, digital and location evidence, and witness testimony. The state's narrative depended on showing that the physical evidence was inconsistent with a drive-by and more consistent with an internal shooting. The defense, in turn, pressed on what experts can and can't reliably conclude, challenged how investigators interpreted phone and location data, and questioned whether key devices were exclusively controlled by one person. This is where cases like this become less about headlines and more about methods: how evidence was gathered, how it was interpreted, and how confident the court should be that the interpretation is the only reasonable one. Then came the moment that defines why the case is still alive: the mistrial. On July 22, 2023, after the jury deliberated for roughly 14 hours over 3 days, the court declared a mistrial because jurors could not reach the legally required verdict threshold. The judge issued what's known as an Allen charge, an instruction urging jurors to continue deliberating and make a genuine effort to reach unanimity. Even after that, the jury did not resolve the case. Bars and receipts has to be crystal clear here. A mistrial is not a win for either side. It's not a conviction, and it's not an acquittal. It means the case did not finish. Juror commentary reported afterward suggested a split, described as 9-3, with many jurors leaning toward conviction on lesser included offenses like manslaughter rather than first-degree murder. That detail is not a verdict and does not replace court documentation, but it does help explain a key point. The jury apparently wrestled not just with did something happen, but with the level of proof required for the specific charges and elements presented. That kind of split is exactly why retrials happen, because the state believes it can prove its case, and the defense believes reasonable doubt remains. After the mistrial, the next chapter was supposed to be straightforward: set a retrial date and do it again. Instead, the case entered the phase that drags major prosecutions for years: evidence litigation. According to the information provided, the retrial became stalled as courts and attorneys fought over admissibility issues, including whether a specific video connected to Demons' YouTube channel could be used as evidence. This is not a minor procedural dispute. Evidence rulings can determine what a jury is allowed to hear, and when those rulings are appealed, the entire case can pause while higher courts decide whether the trial judge got it right. That's how a criminal case turns into a legal traffic jam. Motions are filed, rulings are challenged, appeals are pursued, schedules get moved, judges rotate, and the defendant remains in custody as the system argues about rules before the next jury ever gets seated. Based on your notes, those issues contributed to the retrial being postponed until at least January 2027, meaning Demons will have spent roughly 8 years in custody without a conviction on these homicide counts. That fact doesn't resolve the case, but it explains why the case draws so much attention. It's an unusually long stretch between arrest and final outcome. The stakes are further amplified by Florida's death penalty framework. You reference Florida's non-unanimous death penalty standard, allowing a death recommendation if 8 of 12 jurors agree. That matters because capital sentencing rules shape trial posture and settlement dynamics. In a death-eligible case, every evidentiary ruling becomes heavier because the punishment phase, if the case ever reaches it, can carry life or death consequences depending on the controlling law and how it is applied. While Demons' retrial has been delayed, the co-defendant track has moved. Based on the information you provided, Cortland Henry, YNW Bortland, ultimately accepted a negotiated plea deal. The summary you included indicates Henry pleaded no contest to accessory-related charges and additional counts, received a 10-year prison sentence, and will face a period of probation after release with credit for time already served. Bars and receipts reads that as a legal signal. Prosecutors appear to have taken the position that the evidence was stronger for after-the-fact conduct, helping conceal, misdirect, or tamper than for proving beyond a reasonable doubt that Henry was a principal shooter. That distinction matters because it clarifies how the state views the division of responsibility, at least as it relates to what they believe they can prove at trial. Your notes also include references to separate allegations involving witness tampering and additional charges. These matters are significant when they move from rumor to record, meaning formal charges, hearings, rulings, and outcomes. In any homicide prosecution, allegations related to witness interference can affect bond decisions, custody status, and trial strategy because they speak to the integrity of the process and the risk of interference going forward. So where does the case stand right now? In plain bars and receipts language, Demons has been charged, not convicted, of 2 counts of first-degree murder. He pleaded not guilty. He went to trial in 2023. The jury did not reach a verdict. The court declared a mistrial. Prosecutors indicated an intent to retry, and the retrial has been repeatedly delayed due to litigation over evidence, appeals, and scheduling issues. That is the case file. That is what the court record says happened. Anything beyond that, motive certainty, guilt certainty, what really happened is not for this channel to invent. It is for a jury to decide. The legal significance of this case is not just celebrity attention. It's the way modern prosecutions are built and contested. Forensic reconstruction, location data, digital communications, and the courtroom fight over what is admissible and what is prejudicial. It's also a case study in what mistrials do. They do not end a case. They reset the battlefield. The prosecution adjusts, the defense adjusts, and the court system, slow as it is, moves toward the next attempt at a final verdict. If and when the retrial proceeds, the only questions bars and receipts will answer are the ones that matter legally. What charges were filed, what evidence the court allowed, what the jury found, and what sentence the court imposed, if any. Until then, this file remains what it is today, a high-stakes prosecution with no final verdict yet. This video is based on publicly available court records, indictments, motions, jury outcomes, sentencing documents, and reputable news reporting. It does not speculate or present opinion as fact. All defendants are presumed innocent unless and until proven guilty in a court of law.